United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks.
Good evening and welcome to the March 13th, 2018 school board meeting for the school town of Speedway. We are working from an 8-item agenda. The first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the February 13th, 2018 meeting.
Mr. President, I move we approve the minutes from our last meeting.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of the February 13th, 2018 meeting. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
I will do a shameless commercial while you all are signing the minutes. Some of the background you hear are the students, the players, getting ready for Shrek, the play, the musical. That'll be on Friday night and Saturday night at 7 p.m. for $10. Come early, come often. And I just can't imagine Shrek the musical, but it's I like the movie when it was a so please, and pass word on to the neighbors, because the kids' musicals are usually end up more fun than you'd ever expect. You just end up laughing and smiling and.
Item number 2, present the 2018-2019 Student Parent Handbook.
Mr. Disney has been meeting with the principals and working on our recommendations for changes. As always, we are presenting tonight. We're looking for consensus. If you're nodding, saying that sounds like a good change, we're there. If it can be improved, and we're always looking for suggestions. I would suggest that if you have questions for John as he goes, don't hesitate to ask as he goes. But Mr. Disney, if you'll walk us through.
Yeah, again, these are suggested changes, and just this has gone from 3 handbooks to 1, so we have done a better job over the years of making this a more readable document for our parents and for our teachers. But on page 5 of our document, there's a suggested change that Speedway Schools vision statement would be changed. That was out of our board retreat, and it would read, Speedway Schools prepare students for college and workforce readiness and to be positive contributors to their community in the 21st century. That was what came out of our board retreat in December. On page 6, the school calendar is always updated to reflect the 2018-2019 school year and dates.
Can I interrupt? Just a heads up, this is the last adopted calendar we have. So we're beginning the work with the Teachers Association to create calendar choices for the next 3 years. I can tell you my own personal preference when it comes to calendars. I've never created a calendar that made everyone happy, but the earlier I created calendars, the better people could to prepare for it. So our goal would be, by summer, would be to come forward with a recommendation for calendars through 2022. Sorry, John, thanks.
On page 9, section C, confidentiality of records, update wording on release of directory information to military services and academias. The wording is establish what information will be released. So what we're trying to do there is say what we will release to those institutions. Page 11, section 1, Speedway Parent Teacher Association. Remove the wording. There was wording in there that said your family may join SPT by sending the yearly fees to school. To my knowledge, we've never charged fees to be in part of the SPT, so that was one of those things that was just left in there that should be removed. On page 13, section P, computer use. Since we're going to be adding a lot of different devices throughout our buildings, fixed and mobile devices throughout our facilities, and under guidelines for teachers and lab supervisors, add students may not install programs or apps into school devices or services. Students may not run any programs or apps that are not authorized by the school's professional staff. Page 20, section 5, appropriate dress. This is one of those that's, every year there's something in school that comes up. This one is, students are not permitted to bring blankets or similar items to school. It's one of those things that every year it seems like students bring something to school, whether it's whatever it is, clappers when I was in school, that ages me. But these are things that are not permitted in school day.
I'm not real big for specific things but when they become something that happens repeatedly, that's why we're putting it in. Apparently this is become a common thing that they wear a blanket to school to walk in, which makes you wonder if they do have a code or what, but.
Part of the issue with it, I think, also was you bring them to classes and have them in the classroom and the tripping hazard of having them in classrooms or in the hallways. That was asked to be added, not to bring those to school.
It's a high school issue right now, right?
It is.
It
is.
Which means it'll be a junior high issue.
Probably. Won't be now. Page 21, section W, lockers. We have locks that are on lockers, PE locks that go on lockers, and also at the junior high, we allow some kids to put locks on lockers if that's what they choose. And if they ever lose those, the price to replace those was $6. We're losing money on those because the price of locks went up. So the price of locks now are $9 to replace those. So that's the reason why that's a price difference. On page 21, section 10, cafeteria, the updated meal prices for Speedway schools to meet state requirements. Each year there's an update of what the school meal prices would be. On page 21, section 10 in cafeteria, we added breakfast will not be served on days where school functions on a 2-hour delay schedule. Schools on those days start at 10 o'clock, and usually by about 10:30, 10:40, we are serving lunch. Now, I will tell you, as a former principal, if a student came in and they were hungry, we would always find something for them to eat. But we don't want to advertise that there's breakfast served on those days when you eat lunch 20 minutes or a half hour later. Page 23, section Z, another one of those things that's been in there for a while, but bicycle permits are issued by elementary principals only. High school principal and junior high principal hadn't issued a bicycle permit in ever that I'm aware of. So this is just for the elementary principals. And on page 44 and 45, section A, immunizations and updated health services. That's under the general section. In the elementary section on page 58, Title I, school parent involvement policy, replace No Child Left Behind with Every Student Succeeds Act. On page 59, Title I, meeting dates for each elementary school. We have to have a Title I meeting date at each building, and this is a schedule change that we update every year. On page 59, remove quarterly math assessments from each elementary school on pages 59 and 60 to read 3 times a year. And what that is when we were first giving acuity tests, we would give them quarterly. We started giving our STAR math assessments quarterly, and even STAR has said that 3 times a year is sufficient unless we're using them for progress monitoring type of assessments. On page 61, school year date changes from 2017 to 2018. On page 62 in section K, students use personal devices. One of the things that technology has done is it keeps adding things, and under this, we've added smartwatches under lists of items not permitted. The junior high section on page 63, section A, grading, the regular honor roll. The regular honor rolls, we suggest that change that to a student shall be eligible for a regular honor roll for any 9-week grading period, provided the student earns all A's and B's and at least an average of 3.0 on a 4.0 grading scale. I can tell you the history behind that is that that's kind of what we always wanted, but we did it by searching with GPA, and you could actually have a C sometimes and actually make a 3.0 or higher, so we want to remove that.
I was gonna say that, so what was this changed from?
Yeah, that's why, because the search used to be if we were doing honor roll, we would search by GPA. And if you search by GPA, the person could actually have one C in there and make the honor roll. And now we just search not by GPA. We can actually have a visual search, and they got to make all A's and B's to make the honor roll. Superior honor roll is the same thing. The next one on page 63, superior honor roll was going to be all A's, and the exact same thing happened. Sometimes if you search by GPA, you could find a student make a B and make the superior honor roll. We wanted the superior honor roll to be an all A honor.
Is this the 9 weeks GPA?
Each one of those honor rolls, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, each one of those honor rolls are 9 weeks.
Okay.
On page 66 in section 8, again, smartwatches are listed under items not permitted. And then on page 67, the 2-hour delay schedule and breakfast not being served on those 2 hours of delay. The high school section, recommended changes. Their honor roll, their honor roll is they're requesting to be determined 4 times a year out of the academic year, quarter 1, semester 1, quarter 3, and semester 2. And that's a change from quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4, so the 2 semesters are in there instead. And a student should be eligible for the regular honor roll for any of the aforementioned terms, provided the student earns at least a letter of C or better in each of his classes and earns a grade point average of 2.9 or better for the grading term.
And what was that changed from?
What it was from is they did the honor roll based on.
Okay, that was the only part that was changed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It wasn't a.
So we've always had regular honor roll be a 2.9 at the high school?
I think so. I think so.
Seems low.
Yeah. And you can see the superior honor roll is basically the same thing, except the grade point average is 3.5 or better for a grading term.
I'm curious about that regular honor roll number, and I'd be curious.
Here's the obvious question. Why would it be 3.0 at the elementary and junior high school
Yes.
and 2.9 at the high school?
That is a question.
Okay, I mean, because I'm sitting down here with Laura and quite frankly, haven't delved into this. I've never been anywhere that it wasn't at least a 3.0 or an all B thing. So I think that's a question we'll take back to the high school as they look at that.
As a former junior high principal, one of the things we always wanted was an honor roll just to be A's and B's. If you made all A's and B's, you made honor roll. The problem became, how do you search for that? Because you can't search by letters. You have to search by a GPA. And if you search by a GPA, you could actually make a C in one of your classes. And if you did the math, you could actually make a C in one of your classes and make the honor roll.
But couldn't you, do a search and then do a visual search after, once you've narrowed it to the, however many people? I mean, it seems like that can't drive.
Because I have a propensity for this, I'm a junior high student and I make B minuses in every class. made all Bs, but I don't make the honor roll, because that's a 2.7. We could probably clean this up, but we'll need to ask the high school why 2.9 is more magical than 3.0, number one, and number two, there may be a reason. We need to find that, you know. And then the other thing we can do pretty easily, let's see if it makes, how big of a difference it makes anyway. But there may be a reason we're not thinking about, but let's ask the question before we come back. And
The last one is on page 79, in the high school section, visitation to Speedway High School. Upon entering the building, all visitors must check in the front office and receive a visitor badge. A visitor badge, what they've added is a visitor badge will only be granted when a limited background check is obtained. There's a suggested change in there.
that's grown out of the identities thing we put in every front office. Let me give you an example. Someone walks in and says, gee, I didn't bring in my ID. Well, I'm sorry, we're not going to let you go in our building. Now, if you previously have had it and we've given you a badge, we understand that. But I don't want to do that. I understand that, but you're not going in our building as a visitor. I think we're well within our grounds of saying we need to know the identity of anyone that comes into our building.
How does that work at the high school does someone then escort them out or, right? Because you can't just say you have to leave because they can go out and go wherever.
We would simply keep it. No one's challenged us. But I can think of once I've gotten a phone call, but the bottom line is, if anybody got a little bit upset, we'd call the school resource officer, and we'd give them the opportunity to exit or have some type of other issue.
Yeah. It just seems like that we ought to have a strategy in place. Because that seems that is getting
I think the purpose of
less,
yeah.
less likely not to happen. I mean, you know what I mean?
You wouldn't think anybody would have any issue with this, but it will happen.
I think the purpose of them adding this, and it's not a bad thing, is if I give you my ID and it shows up that I've got something on my background that I shouldn't be involved or shouldn't be in the building, this is the reason why this is in there. You know, we have a right to say, no, you can't come in. And whether that would become, combative or whatever, I don't know. But the purpose of this is to limit their access to the building.
Okay, let me ask you this, from a school safety standpoint. So, first off, I would like to see this be 2 paragraphs, and there to be a second paragraph with the guest/former students. So that's clear and obvious, not buried in the middle of this paragraph. And in other, all these other ones where we have multiple paragraphs, we have a space, an open line. Because I think that, that would just call attention to, and I think we want to call attention to. See what I'm talking about there? So where it's guest/former students would start a new paragraph, which means there would be a space. And then along those lines, I would like us to be sure that we have again, a plan in place because this is just not allowed, right? So you show up at the front door, you push the little button, and someone says, what? Who are you? And what do people say? What are you here for? And
Pretty much, when they open the door, we see a camera. If they look visually
yes,
we allow them in.
And so then they'd come around, and then they come in, they say, oh, I graduated 2 years ago, and then we would say, you're not allowed.
What we'd say is, no, you need to check in what would typically happen is, you need to check in as a visitor.
Okay.
Even though you've been a graduate of ours.
Right.
Now, what's your purpose? I just want to go walk around and hang around? No, not during the student day. We don't have, and try not to allow. Now, if they say, I'm here to see Mr. Gay in English, we would call up and say, were you expecting Mr. Gay? And then there would be some, we know the student, we know who they are, and we're probably not going to escort them to the room, and we would expect them to behave only better than they did. But pretty unusual for a visitor to be in the building, going towards the, mostly it's somebody's coming in to check in and.
I just, with with the, former students coming back to schools and causing problems issue that we've seen, it just seems
Yeah,
like.
some way, we'll think about that
Yeah,
one.
that would be because
and-
that would be the,
This-
oh, we recognize you, oh, it seems like, and then,
Well, what I will say is that our procedures when it comes to safety wouldn't be something we'd list in the handbook, because if someone was here to,
sure, no,
But
that's
we-
what I'm
but we
saying,
wanna have it.
yeah. And if we really mean without prior administrative approval, then there would, I imagine there'd be a fair number of people that would think, oh, I can just come back, and then what do we do when that happens with a former student?
right.
It
right,
may
with
or
the
may not.
Separate.
That would be nuts.
Yeah.
That happened more times than you would think, that they would come back and they
Sure.
don't mean harm. They
No.
just- They want to say hi to their teacher.
I can remember when,
Can't do that
I
in
was in the
instructional.
school all the time, and former grads would come back and, want to see their friend or their sibling or or a teacher, or think they could come in and have lunch, or all kinds of things.
Most of that's a testimony to how inviting our teachers in our
Mm-hmm.
schools are, but they need to understand that learning's going on and they can't interrupt that. And most of them are great with that.
Yeah,
Come back at another time, and they do.
well, and I
Yeah, but
think
that's what-
times have changed
Yes.
also.
that- Good procedures and good, but that, we can do both those.
Those are the suggested changes.
Are there any comments from other members of the board? Well, thank you for your work on this, and we look forward to getting a chance to approve something in April.
We appreciate extra eyes. You see something that you notice, please don't hesitate to let us know. We'd like to bring, but even next month when we bring it back, we're gonna bring back the cleanest copy we have, but we are gonna ask for your permission for two things. To make obvious edits that are just errors and don't change the substantive meaning, and any changes that we might have to make because of legal interpretation. Now, the session is supposed to end tomorrow. You would think that by the end of March, we could get new law, but the reality is it'll be May before the School Board Association attorneys tell us things that we ought to be including. So we'll ask that you give us the leeway to make those changes as they come from the ISBA.
Thank you. Item number 3, approve agreement with vendor to provide latchkey services.
Advertised, received sealed bids, open bids, evaluated bids. We had one bidder for our, what they now call out-of-school time services contract. It has been the vendor we've used since the inception of the program in the 90s, AYS, formerly known as At Your School. Our recommendation is that we renew, or we accept the new contract as presented. They have made a few changes per the recommendation of the school board's attorney. And what I see as a good thing about this is it used to be that we could do this for 3 years. Now they've expanded it. This is a 5-year agreement. So it saves the expense of advertising and things. So I'd recommend you approve this agreement.
I move that we approve the agreement with AYS to provide latchkey services for the district as necessary.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? It's been moved and seconded that we approve the purchase of approve the agreement with vendor to provide latchkey services. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Item number 4, approve purchase of network equipment as bid through the E-rate process.
E-rate is a federal program. It is essentially, no matter what you call it, a tax on your cell phone. You pay it every month with your cell phone bill. The federal government collects a great deal of money. They make those funds available to schools across the country. They have very strict regulations. They will release those E-rate funds to schools under certain under certain programs. We have followed the E-rate program. We have put out a request for proposals from vendors, and we have a summary of the vendors in your packet. At this time, and we can buy individual pieces of equipment per the bid process. They're actually coming in lower than we estimated. But at this time, the recommendation is you allow us to purchase those items bid by CDWG. They have the low bid on the major items, and when I say there are three types of items in this bid. There are what are commonly called switches. Those are high-powered computers that send and break information into what's called packets, send it over the internet in many millions of directions, and then reassemble the packets on the other end. These are we call them switches, but they're more high-powered than any computer we typically use, although the level of power you need depends on the number of users you have, which consequently, bigger computers in the switches in the high school, smaller in the elementary schools. Likewise, one of the key things about a switch is that it's not a computer that you can simply lose to power failure. You have to put an uninterrupted power source on it, not because it'll run the switch for very long, but it'll allow it to finish its work and shut down properly so that you don't lose traffic in the middle. So at this time, we're recommending that we accept the bid for prices from CDWG. For the top four items are switches, then you have access point or a uninterrupted power source, and then access points. Now, we had a problem in the bids that some bidders thought they were bidding 10 access points and some thought they were bidding 10 packages of 10 access points. It's unfair to count those bids, so we are rebidding the access points and the installation so that all bidders have a chance. One of the things I will tell you, we are recommending that CWG is the lowest price on the main item switches, and we prefer to stay with CWG on all items so that we don't end up in a situation where this doesn't work, it's your switch, it's your access point, it's your installation. One vendor we can hold accountable to, and in the overall price of product, they are the low and the most responsive vendor. One thing I want to point out, where you see the red numbers, those don't mean lowest. Those mean they bid a piece of equipment.
See red?
Oh, you don't have, I'm sorry. I didn't make color copies. Occasionally, a bidder will bid equal to or better than. They have to prove that. But that's why we have an ad tech consultant. So what I'm recommending is that you approve the purchase of the switches from and uninterrupted power sources from CDWG, with the understanding that the installation and the access points, these small items, of which there are hundreds, we're rebidding to see where that goes. Now, you want to see a breakdown of where it goes by school. Those are the next pages. Reality is, on page 3 of that packet, I'm asking for your approval to go out and to start the purchase process for $127,000.73 worth of equipment. Understanding that in all likelihood, there's probably about $80,000 more to go on the installation and the wireless access points. Those bids will come in. Now, here's the good news. This will only happen if this purchase is approved by E-rate. And if it's approved by E-rate, the reality is they will pay 80% of the cost, and we will pay 20%. So $127,000 will be broken down, $96,000 E-rate, $26,000 Speedway. This is an impossible opportunity to pass up. And then if we go to the wireless access points and installation, that $80,000 would be broken down about $64,016. The reality is the $200,000 project will cost us about $40,000, but none of it happens until the federal government. So it's not as if we start this and we're on the hook for $200,000. In fact, we'll only pay our part, and the companies will bill the federal government to get their funding.
When do we hear, Ken, about whether the federal government approves? I don't understand the process.
Yeah, the reason we're bringing this to you partially is because as soon as we sign the purchase orders, they go to the federal government. They're thinking that we can get approval in April, because getting out in the market for this equipment, sometimes the hardest part of this is actually getting the equipment. And wireless access points are quite a bit more available. We believe that if we can get that together by April, we can send that out and have it. We think by May 1st, we can have all approvals and be purchasing equipment. And that's not a best case, but it's also not a worst case. It's getting federal. But absent your approval to start the process and buy the computers, the switches, then we wait another month. But
Laura?
I move that we approve the purchase of the network equipment as bid through the E-rate process, and that's specifically with CDWG.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Bill. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the purchase of network equipment as bid through the E-rate process with CDWG. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
You need to know that the board president did you a favor. When I explained this to him, I got out a piece of paper and drew packets and coding and everything, and when he fell asleep, I realized that was a bit much. So he told me I couldn't do that to you.
Took one for the team.
Oh, the joy of being president.
He did, listen.
As we move on to item number 5. Item number 5, acknowledgement of grants received.
We'd recommend that by consensus, you accept $269,075.74 of grants and gifts to the school corporation, by far, mostly grants, and the huge part of this, food service reimbursement.
Employment recommendations.
Okay. You got to remember that I have an additional one, but the name Nicole Marquardt may be familiar to you. She filled a maternity leave at the end of the first semester. We really like this when we find a teacher who's willing to fill a maternity leave, then stay as an assistant. She is now filling in through the rest of the year at Fisher Elementary. It also gives us a great opportunity to audition a teacher and see how they work. So we're recommending a temporary teacher contract through the end of the school year for Miss Nicole Marquardt. We're recommending Mr. Dominic Johnson as a custodian for the grounds as Mr. Foxworthy is retiring. And if possible, we may bring him in before Mr. Foxworthy actually exits, just for a little bit of training. We're recommending Caitlin Gregory as a ninth grade softball coach for this coming spring. And we have added, thank you, the recommendation for, somebody on the team help me.
Charles, CJ Stocker.
Yeah, as the junior high assistant baseball coach.
Board's pleasure. Laura?
I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendations with regard to Nicole Marquardt, Dominic Johnson, Katie Gregory, and Charles Stocker.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded that we accept the employment recommendations of Nicole Marquardt, Dominic Johnson, Caitlin Gregory, and Charles Stocker. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Recognition of visitors. Any other business?
No, sir.
Okay. Then we will adjourn to approve claims.